teach according to definition.
Yes.
And I'm not going to lecture at you, but how am I going to convey what hearing, heeding, obeying? Because the will to obedience and listening are intimately connected for Heidegger since Nietzsche. So her success will be more lasting the less she scolds him. It will be easier the more directly she can get him to listen, not just condescend to listen. So it's not a little boy who's, you know, you can imagine just, okay, okay, but listen in such a way that he can no longer stop wanting to do it. So this interested me very much, so dass vom Hören wollen nicht mehr lassen kann. He can no longer let go of or leave off from hören wollen. He desires to hear. He wants to hear. This is henceforth the haunted ear, the addicted ear, the ear that cannot not hear or heed or obey. This is something the mother penetrates this ear, opens it, and addicts it, in a sense, evermore. And why? Because his ears have been opened and he can now hear. And what does he hear? Not an external call or ordering, but what is in accord with his nature. Learning, then, cannot be brought about by scolding. Even so, a man who teaches must at times grow noisy. In fact, he may have to scream and scream, although the aim is to make his students learn so quiet a thing as thinking. Nietzsche endured the agony of having to scream. So that was something that I thought we could maybe work with here. That there's a two-in-one, a twofer right there. A mother calling a son who's not present or can't be made to be present, as some of us discussed. There's maybe, well, is there a return possible? It's not affirmed here. Or is it presumptuous of Heidegger? And does it suggest, this be Heidegger calling the straying Nietzsche home to the house of being? He's been poster boy for the Nazis. He's been circulating and spreading, destroying world in certain ways. And Heidegger's bringing him home so that we can lose him, by the way, not so that we can find Nietzsche, but so that we can properly lose Nietzsche, because he doesn't want him to become substantial and a kind of killer text in a certain way. So Heidegger as Mutti, maybe. Also, the figure of the mother isn't simply aleatory. This whole contemplation on thinking begins with the mother of the muses, which is memory and remembrance. Good luck with that.
I just wanted to comment on the melancholic transmission you find installed here in Was heißt denken, between the mother and the future, which interests me very much, because melancholic transmission can never be the same thing as a tradition, which is possibly, at least on analytic turf, Klein's contribution. As Judith pointed out, in Freud, when we talk about melancholia, we're still talking about a relationship between two. And that has something to do, I would say, with Freud's attempt, even on melancholic turf, to put the father at the front of the line for therapeutic purposes. But he was elsewhere also open to the prospect of there being quite a crowd of ghosts that one deals with. I mean, this is something as old as Hamlet's father's ghost. Not only is it outside the play, both Shakespeare's father and his dead son who inhabit the ghost, but one has the sense that it's not just the father. So there's this interesting turn toward a melancholic transmission here in Heidegger too, which just leads me to a smaller point perhaps with regard to the question you were asking, Judith, about 1964, because I also detected in the excerpt, as you heard, that there is some haunted figuration of inheritance here as well. And the first thing that I would associate with 1964 is, of course, the influence of Adorno in Germany. Adorno is the figure at that time, or to this day, of contesting Heidegger's inheritance of Nietzsche. Adorno is the one who adds to that contesting an inclusion of psychoanalysis, which I touched on before. And then Hannah Arendt, of course, counters this brilliantly, because she never, it's hard to locate her in these disputes or in this question of inheritance. She certainly, her text reflects it as a problem, but it's hard for me to, anyway, to say exactly where she takes sides. But she, of course, is editing Illuminations.
Yes. Brilliant introduction. Yeah.
And in that introduction, in Illuminations, of course, she foregrounds that Benjamin that is very much openly influenced by Freud. But in the introduction, she refers to Adorno as Benjamin's best student, which is not wrong at all. It's kind of...
That's when she puts her cigarette out.
But again, I would read that doubly. While yes, it's bitchy, but if you... What it salvages for me is that correspondence between Adorno and Benjamin, where the received notion comes down hard on Adorno as censoring Benjamin and so on and so forth. But I actually read in many of those remarks some of the most brilliant observations that Adorno makes in the course of reminding Benjamin of where he came from in the Origin book. So he really is like an excellent student. I mean, the best student reminds the professor, who can't remember his earlier work, that there is this history, which is not unimportant.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to fill in that blank.
So I'm thinking we need to do three things. We need to take a break. We need to hear your questions. But I also think we need to return to this question of having ears that do not want to stop listening and having ears that can hear nothing, such that screaming becomes the only apparent alternative, which I find very interesting as a movement in the Heideggerian text, and of course he ends up with this idea that thinking is a kind of appeal or a call. And we have maternal conveyance as one way of doing that, and then we have screaming Nietzsche as another. What are the conditions under which such an extreme polarization might occur? And then maybe we can turn to the Arendt, where she actually talks about what happens when solitude is interrupted by an address. Mm-hmm. When somebody calls to me or appeals to me, and I suddenly go from being two in one to being momentarily one when I act, and then I go back to being two in one when I don't act, which might be a way for us to maybe return to the question of thinking and action and what the relation is.
My question will be, and then I do want to hear, I know James had his hand up and so on. My question is, and it seems as though she also proposes almost as a political, if not almost Zen practice, that you have to